Yeah, that's hard because, like I said, I was in a lot of different eras in the UFC. But I would say in the prime is that I think that I want people to realize the not just me, but everyone involved in at that time, from the owners, from the people involved in setting up the ring and breaking it down, attorneys, everybody that was involved, keeping the UFC alive, being able to go in and fight. Sometimes some of us didn't get paid that much, but because we loved doing it, that we were able to keep this thing alive, to be able to see what we see today, be able to have that fan base that we have today. Every one of those guys in the beginning, man, that went out there and kept fighting, and the ones that became champion, the ones that, were fan favorites, they all had a part in being able to keep the UFC alive long enough for it to be able to be what it is today. So that's what I want people to really appreciate about not just myself, but the earlier fighters in the UFC, was that, man, we did it because we loved it, and it was exciting and fun, and we love fighting. So for me, I think that's what me personally, I want people to know about me. It had nothing to do with the fame. Obviously, that's fun and it comes along with it, but it was a love and desire of fighting.
Well, I think I'd like to be remembered probably on a couple of different occasions. I mean, first off, I was the athlete representative. That when they were asking someone to speak on behalf of the athletes, I was that representative. So again, I come from a non-fighting background. I come from a combat type background, but I've just basically been an athlete my entire life, as I said, just through the sport of wrestling. And so I'm someone that actually gives a great deal of care and concern about the athletes. There's certain things that is still wrong about the UFC. The sheer fact that they'll take care of you that match that night. I mean, if you go in that match that night and you break your leg or something like that in the process, so you need to be hospitalized, UFC they're good about that. They'll take care, make sure that your leg gets fixed, stuff like that, and they'll take care of all the hospitalizations on that. But there really isn't anything more to it that they really should be doing something more for the athletes for overall. There should be some type of a guideline that after you've done maybe X number of matches in the UFC, you're now a fully vested athlete, and there should be some type of residual type of royalty that you should be receiving after that. Again, as long as you've been one of these people that have been a positive advocate of the sport, not just because you and Dana White, are bumping heads left and right onto things, because it seemed like Dana was bumping heads with a lot of different athletes at different times. I just think overall there's competition. Competition is a good thing. I'm actually happy that there are other companies that are trying to rise up and try to compete with UFC. But right now the UFC is the best paying gig opportunity for these athletes. Now, again, there's in the back of my mind is like going, but why hasn't the UFC brought on people like myself? I would be probably one of the best ambassadors for the sport, because I know what the athletes want, and I know what the company wants. You can bring it together. There's no reason that the UFC couldn't have had, just every year that in operation, just throw $1 million into this athletes fund that you have, to where, in the first year, you're only going to have that measly $1 million right there. But, after 30 years, you got a 30 million, nest egg that's sitting right there that you could have had some type of a payout program for athletes that, like a football, yeah, basketball, baseball, all the major sports have got some type of a program that if a athlete is fallen upon hard times, gets caught up into gambling, gets caught up into drug addictions of this nature, that there are some programs that they could go into that. But then there's other programs that, that can be something where it benefits these athletes for being this little shining example and stuff like that, that there should be some type of residual that they should be getting, because it was upon their bodies and their minds that this sport is now there. So to where, again, I'm doing the same thing here with Arizona State University. I'm just starting to work with them right now to where I don't want to go after money each and every year for your season. I'm not here to do that. I will work with a number of these different former athletes and that. And I want to build up the nest egg to where, does that mean 10 million? Does that mean 20 million? To where you never touch the nest egg. You simply work off of the interest. And even then, you don't use up all the interest. You don't use up 100% interest. You only use up maybe 75 or 80% of the interest, because next year, once I built you to this level, every year it's going to continue to grow, because that's really what investments should do. If they're invested properly, they should just continue to grow. And as long as you're only working off of the interest, you will be taken care of for the rest of your career and the careers of anyone and everyone behind you. And again, that's my proposal to them. But I keep getting certain reminders that they don't get it yet. And so if I don't get back to them, eventually they'll say, well, what's wrong? I go, now that I have your attention, because you're not responding to me in the first place. I said, I'm going to do it like this, and I'm only going to do it this way only. Because I don't like going out and what I call begging for dollars. Now I'll go and see people that have been successful, to where it'll be just a monthly little residual. We get it all built. We get that nest egg built up to where it perpetuates itself. Then we're done.
Right. A month before I found out, right? Normally they do this, Where Are They Now? Right. I don't know if you've ever seen that, this segment they'll do on Five Pass stuff. And they've been asking for the last 5, 6, 7 years. And I'm like, hell no. And like, why? I go, because I don't like where I'm at. Fuck this. I'm not doing it. I'm part of my language. I'm like, fuck this. I'm not doing this, man. I don't like where I'm at, And so this time they called, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, I will do it, because I'm happy where I'm at. I love what I'm doing. I love, like I said, I love doing this stream for the UFC. I love, my family's everybody's healthy, and I don't have all those regrets. So I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And that set it up. So come that weekend, because we do a watch along every weekend for the fights. We're doing one this weekend. Plug, but I've got TSM Vis, and Robert Whitaker are going to be my guests for Saturday. So yeah, we're going to be doing a watch along for the pay-per-view. And anyway, so I was like, all right. And he goes, well, hey, at one point the sponsors, we changed your background. I was like, all right, cool. So my background was changed. And like, all right, you got to change your hat. I'm like, what do you mean? They want you to wear the UFC. So I got my world champion hat. I'm like, all right, fine, I'll put that on. Sponsors wanted to make sure that you turn off your phone. I'm like, hey, these sponsors are starting to piss me off, but all right. So I got the sponsors, you know what I mean? I'm like, all right, damn the sponsors. And so they said what they're going to do is when they go live, when we go live for the pay-per-view, they're going to put you on the big screen. You got to go big screen real quick. Tell your guests, they'll know. You'll be right back. And I was sort of waiting to react to something. So I was like, all right, shit. So I'm just sitting there minding my business. In fact, he caught the video where 2 hours before that, somebody had asked me in chat, hey, Hall of Fame? I'm like, nah, man, I haven't done enough. I don't know. I'm probably not, but I appreciate you bringing it up. Thank you very much. And 2 hours, and then he's got the 2 hours later. And then I'm like, oh, shut the fuck up. This is what? And then all of a sudden they kicked it off. It's like, holy, yeah, I freaked out. They got me good. It was, but like to get back to it, I do appreciate what everybody says, it's about time, but to me, it's the perfect time. And I go back to that moment. The reason why I got long-winded there was because I'm in a good place. I don't think I would have appreciated it before, but being on this UFC stream, doing what I've been doing for the UFC, bringing myself back into fighting, just breaking down fights, being a part of the fighting again. I'm just in such a good place. I kind of let all that, I'd let all, my regrets, the woes, the wouldas, the shouldas, all those things behind. And I'm just in a happy place. So like I said, to a point where I was like, yeah, you know what? I'll do that. Where are they now? So it was the perfect time and hell of a setup. My son being the age he is, and everything. Yeah, it was perfect. When I first started fighting, it's weird, this whole thing And getting this Hall of Fame it's funny because somebody just said it the best on the stream the other day. It's like my heroic journey has finally come to an end, and now I can go back to the Shire, if that makes sense. It's like this put the ending, you know what I mean? This put that cap on the end of my, like that closing. And so my heroic journey is over. And it just takes me back. I like, that's the one thing I realized, like, now I want to go back. I find myself wanting to talk to people I grew up with, find where it all started. And I was doing an interview the other day with Cristobal Garcia, where we all began and how I got in that truck and drove down to California, was going to train with Bob Shamrock. But even before that, when I was just doing fights, we were just setting up fights in gyms, and we were fighting literally the Bronco gym. I would set up a boxing ring and we'd bring people in and just beat them up, or they'd beat us, or whatever. But we just have fights, and we were fighting for videotape. And to go to the Boss Shoot Invitational, fighting at 170 there, and John Peretti, who was the matchmaker for the UFC when it was owned by SEG, said, "Hey, I want to start this 155-pound division, and I want you to be the guy." And I'm like, all right. So to be able to relive that, it was really cool. That was the one bonus about working for UFC and being able to go on their Twitch stream. I got to go on Fight Pass. And my first day when I was auditioning, so to speak, for the job, I'm like, oh God, I get to watch fights I never got to watch before. You know what I mean? Okay, here we go. And I told the story. I told the whole story about every fight, about what was happening, how I was transitioning, how I decided to move out to Iowa. I got on a train. 2.5 days later, I showed up and dropped my bags. Like, I'm ready to be a world champion. You know what I mean? And just the whole story to how how I got that opportunity to fight for the world title. And, you know, it's crazy. But to go back to the very beginning of your question, that's the one thing. Like, ever since this whole thing started, it's really cool because now I finally want to talk about the past. I never did before because I wasn't, you know what I mean? I was too busy. You're too busy charging forward, like I said. So the quote unquote, the heroic journey finally came to an end. And I literally kind of find myself going, yeah, I'm ready to go back to the Shire. Like, I'm done fighting. You know what I mean? I just fought. I did all this fighting. I did all this chasing after my dreams. I've done all this growing. I'm out here in Iowa. You know what I mean? I've done all this achieving, or you know, I mean, goal setting and whatever. And then I finally, to get this, I finally was able, for the first time in my life, I was like, yeah, I want to go back and I want to tell everybody thank you. And I hope they're proud of me. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. So yeah, it was the whole thing. It's been an amazing, it's been just a crazy journey. But like I said, breaking it down on the stream and stuff, it's just been a lot of fun.
Well, the thing is, you can never train for the fight, because usually when you have somebody in front of you, you can train for that one person. But in MMA, the way how it was when it first started, you had to train for everybody. So you really only trained for your first match, and then you threw it up in the air for your second and third. So I only trained for that guy to beat him good, and then I didn't know, and then it was up in the air what happened. You know, so it was hard. It was hard, but that's the only thing we knew. So whether it was hard or easy, well, that's all we knew. Back then, you stuck to your team because people are trying to find out what you're doing. Are they going to punch them or kick them? They were finding out, because back then it was only one style, and it wasn't MMA. It was NHB, no holds barred. So in the no holds barred, you really didn't know who was doing what. You just had to think about it and train for everything, you know. So NHB is harder, much harder. And in the beginning, when it was tough. It was tough. You didn't know who you had to fight, when you had to fight, how you had to fight, or you had to make sure the fight was kind of quick because you got another one coming. You know, and his fight went long, or if his fight went short and yours went long, you got an uphill battle. So you had to try to make all the fights quick and be over quick so that you can have a lot for the end.
Well, I mean, it's arguably the most blessed portion of my career and my life, right? Like I got to call, you know, George's first 4 fights. I was in the dressing room before he made his MMA debut, right? Like, I got to see this kid that no one ever heard of the nerves, the anxiety, going in there, stepping into the ring and putting on an amazing performance. And then I was able to continue to, our two careers were extremely parallel with one another, right? It's like we rode in the same vehicle, right? His ascension to the UFC, my ascension in the broadcasting ranks, him getting to become a pay-per-view star, me getting on nationally syndicated television with Sportsnet, MMA Connected to UFC Connected to UFC Central. We were the first show. Every time he would get a big win, I'd get a big win, right? He'd doing it in the octagon, I'm doing it outside the octagon, right? Like, he'd become a world champion in the cage, and I'm the only show, or we were the only show on the planet allowed to have the UFC letters, right? So it just grew and grew and grew and grew from there, until we culminated at the Rogers Center together, 55,000 seats. And it was just, I got to see, it's translated well in my other endeavors in life, but being able to see someone no one had ever heard of turn into one of the biggest pay-per-view draws of all time, biggest pay-per-view stars, in the UFC, Conor McGregor aside, of course, you had Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz, and all the other guys, but in watching him grow the way he did, it was like I was taking notes on what an elite athlete has to do in any sport, in any endeavor, how to promote yourself, how to market yourself, how to handle yourself, how to deal with stresses, how to deal with ups and downs in your career. And I took that to myself, and how do I handle those ups and downs? Now that I'm in the soccer world, how do I deal with these young athletes that one day might become superstars, one day might become, a starter for a professional soccer team or their national team or a team overseas? So I kind of lend and give that advice to parents. I give that advice to fighters. I give it to athletes.
So we were brought out, a group of us, Bruce, my producer, Brucey was one of them. We were brought out to Vegas to meet Lorenzo and Frank and Dana. Didn't realize how truly successful they were in business at the time. We just knew these Vegas guys with a lot of money were taking us over. And we were in this back room at an Italian restaurant. And I remember it like yesterday, Giancarlo. Lorenzo said, "Hey, any questions?" And I wasn't a frequent Vegas guy at the time either. And you come down the elevator in Vegas, there's all these billboards of everything going on. And I just said, "Will we ever be on a billboard? A decade later, we're in Times Square flashing up and down with John Jones looking 100 foot tall." That was all I wanted to know at the time. One of the first events that was significant was when President Trump, when we were hosted in Atlantic City. That was like a big deal because that was a little bigger than Lake Charles, Louisiana, or Casino Magic in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. That was part of it. We were already kind of kicking ass, but I will never forget being in your backyard and having 80,000 people at Skydome, because I had done baseball there. I had done the CFL there. I had done hockey across the street from there. I love Tio. My ex is Canadian. I'm a hockey player. I love being up there, as you well know. I love you, brother. You're a great human being. So that was one of them when I really was like, wow, this is working. When Anheuser-Busch came aboard, I knew that was significant, because we literally at one point, Giancarlo, we had a sponsor, Nylabone Dog Chews. No word of a lie. And by Nylabone Dog Chews. What the fuck are Nylabone Dog Chews? So when AB came on, I knew that it was something special. But the best hire and the most influential man in the success of the UFC, especially domestically, is Marc Ratner. And Lorenzo knows that. I mean, Lorenzo was on the Nevada State Athletic Commission with Marc. Marc was the commissioner at the time. Marc's the one who dealt with Tyson biting Holyfield's ear off. But Marc, in addition to John and his background in police and law enforcement, in Jeff Blatnick being an Olympic gold medalist, Lorenzo being an amazing businessman, as they went state to state, there was acceptance because there was validity with a lot of these commissions, because they're like, you know what? If Ratner is saying this is okay, Mark Ratner, he shoots straight. If Mark Ratner's saying this is okay, then we'll give it a chance in our state. And we grew there. And then I remember Lorenzo saying we were going to have global dominance, and he left his role at Station Casinos. Frank took that full time. Lorenzo focused all of his, basically 20 hours a day with Zuffa and the UFC. And, a year or so later, we're in Abu Dhabi, putting up a stadium. We do the show and they tore it down. They have so much money there. They tore it down the next day, put it up the next time we came. So yeah, it built itself as we worked our way up, but the Ultimate Fighter was also the turning point in a lot of ways. And Forrest and Stefan in that fight, I remember looking at Frank after that fight, like, holy crap. And I'm like, two contracts. Now, I'm not going to say it was my idea. People forget they did give both of them contracts at the time. And Diego Sanchez beat a chubby, and Kenny would laugh if you heard me, because Kenny was 185 back then. Beat a chubby Kenny Florian. But that was when I knew we were going someplace, because we were now on normal TV, if you will, on Spike. It wasn't just pay-per-view. So the cult audience that kept us alive was being built in the mainstream, and it just continued to go from there. And we would go to these places, Giancarlo. And I honestly, now that I've been away from it and been able to step back for a few years to reflect on that journey, it's fascinating. It's one of the greatest success stories in business. And not because 2 million became 4.2 billion. It's because a sport that was, deemed so renegade and so wrong and so animalistic by so many was now being embraced as much as the Big Four and on the same networks as the Big Four. And I'm very honored to have been, as many people have said, the soundtrack of that journey. It was unbelievably fascinating and unbelievably enjoyable.